There was no body, no confirmed identity, no confirmed landing site, and no definitive answer to what happened after the parachute disappeared into the darkness. On November 24, 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He carried a briefcase. He ordered a drink. Then he quietly told a flight attendant that he had a bomb. What happened over the next several hours would become one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history. But tonight, we're focusing on something even more specific: the final moments. The moment when Cooper walked toward the rear stairs of the aircraft, opened the door, and disappeared into the night. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, and these were the last moments before he vanished forever. November 24, 1971. Portland International Airport. A man purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle. The name on the ticket was Dan Cooper. He boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305. There was nothing obviously unusual about him. He appeared to be a businessman. He wore a dark suit. He carried a briefcase. And he sat quietly. But somewhere inside that briefcase was the beginning of a plan that would eventually involve the FBI, a ransom payment for parachutes, and one of the largest manhunts in American history. The aircraft was a Boeing 727. There were only a few dozen passengers aboard, and none of them knew what was about to happen. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a flight attendant a note. At first, she reportedly placed it in her purse without reading it. Cooper then leaned toward her and indicated that she should read it. The message claimed that he had a bomb. He opened the briefcase enough for her to see what appeared to be wires and red cylinders. Whether the device was real has never been definitively established, but the threat was taken seriously. Cooper demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. The flight attendant informed the pilots, and the aircraft continued toward Seattle. The FBI became involved. The ransom was prepared. The serial numbers of the bills were recorded. Investigators hoped that if Cooper spent the money, the serial numbers could eventually identify him. Meanwhile, the passengers were unaware of the full situation. The plane landed in Seattle. Cooper received the ransom and parachutes. Most of the passengers were released. But Cooper was not finished. He wanted the aircraft to take off again. His destination was Mexico City. The aircraft refueled. The crew prepared for another flight, and Cooper remained on board. The plane departed Seattle. There were now only a handful of people aboard: Cooper, the pilots, and members of the flight crew. The aircraft began flying south. But Cooper's plan was not what authorities expected. He wanted the aircraft to fly at a relatively low altitude and speed. He wanted the rear stairs to remain available, and he wanted the aircraft configured so that he could eventually leave it. The Boeing 727 had something unusual for an airliner of its era: a rear staircase. That feature would become central to the mystery. The aircraft was somewhere over the Pacific Northwest. Outside was darkness. Below was a landscape of forests, mountains, and rivers. Inside the aircraft, Cooper was preparing. The crew knew he intended to parachute, but they did not know exactly when. The FBI later reconstructed the aircraft's movements and estimated the general area where Cooper may have jumped. But there was a major problem. The exact location was never established with certainty, and that meant investigators were searching an enormous area. Cooper moved toward the rear of the aircraft. The rear staircase became accessible. The aircraft continued through the night. At some point, the stairs were lowered, and Cooper disappeared from the crew's immediate view. The aircraft continued flying. The crew eventually noticed a change in the aircraft handling. They believed the rear staircase had moved. Cooper had apparently left the aircraft. Somewhere below them was a man carrying a parachute and $200,000 in ransom money. But there was no way to know exactly where he had landed. The aircraft eventually landed. Cooper was gone. The ransom was gone. And the man who had called himself Dan Cooper had seemingly vanished into the night. The FBI launched one of the largest investigations in its history. The case was given the name Norjack. Investigators interviewed witnesses. They examined physical evidence. They followed leads. They searched the terrain. But Cooper was never conclusively found. And this is where the story becomes even stranger. The FBI had Cooper's description. They had witness accounts. They had the ransom serial numbers. They had parachutes. They had evidence from the aircraft. But they didn't have Cooper. For decades, investigators received tips from people claiming to know his identity. Hundreds of suspects were considered. Some claimed to be Cooper. Others were accused by family members or investigators. But none was conclusively established as the hijacker. Then, in 1980, something happened that reignited the mystery. A young boy discovered packets of deteriorating $20 bills while playing along the Columbia River. The serial numbers matched part of Cooper's ransom. Only $5,800 was recovered. The discovery created an enormous new question. If Cooper survived, why had some of the money ended up buried along the river? And if he died, where was the rest of the ransom? Over the years, investigators examined parachutes, clothing, fingerprints, eyewitness descriptions, aircraft evidence, and the recovered ransom money. Many theories emerged. Some suggested Cooper died during the jump. Others argued that he survived and disappeared under a new identity. There were also numerous people who claimed to be Cooper. But none of these theories produced definitive proof. And that's what makes the case so enduring. The evidence tells us a great deal about what happened before the jump. But the most important question remains unanswered. What happened after he left the aircraft? There is another reason this case remains fascinating. Cooper wasn't simply running away. He had created a plan. He demanded parachutes. He chose an aircraft with a rear staircase. He understood enough about aviation to make his demands plausible. But there were also enormous risks. He jumped into darkness. The weather was poor. The terrain below was difficult. And he was carrying a heavy bag of money. Whether he survived remains one of the central mysteries. The FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case in 2016 after more than 4 decades. But the mystery never really disappeared. Maybe Cooper died that night. Maybe he survived. Maybe the answer is sitting somewhere inside evidence that investigators have already examined. Or maybe the truth disappeared with him into the Pacific Northwest. We know that a man boarded a plane in Portland. We know he demanded money and parachutes. We know he jumped. And we know that nobody has ever conclusively proved what happened afterward. That's why D.B. Cooper remains one of America's most famous unsolved mysteries. Because sometimes the most mysterious part of a crime isn't how it began. It's what happened after everyone stopped watching. This is Beyond Motive. The last 10 minutes. Every story has a moment when everything changes.